Scythe is an alternate 1920s-era faction war strategy board game by Jamie Stegmaier and published by Stonemaier Games. Scythe is available as both a digital board game and a non-digital board game. Players control factions with the goal of earning the most amount of coins at the end of the game. The game ends whenever one player reaches 6 stars. Reaching 6 stars does not secure victory, however. Stars can be earned by completing all 6 upgrades, building all 4 mechs, building all 4 structures, enlisting all 4 recruits, hiring all 8 workers, completing one of the 2 objective cards, winning a battle up to 2 times, acquiring 18 popularity, or acquiring 16 power points. Because players can achieve stars in numerous ways, players are required to strategically plan their actions based on the faction they are playing and the player mats that they are assigned. Since players start at a specific place on the board depending on the faction they are playing as, player mats can either work in their favor for their base, or require players to start slow and work the board to gather resources and build their military power. Resources are required to perform any bottom row action on the player mat, and players must have the required number of resources to perform that action. Because of this, players must be resourceful and be quick yet efficient for gathering resources. Resources are gathered and left on the tiles that they were produced from, so it is not only important to focus on the resources, but on military power as well. If a player were to move their units without their resources, any player can collect it by claiming the tile. A player can lose their resources if they are attacked and lose the battle. When a player loses the battle, their units are forced to retreat to their base or to an available tile, and the resources are then gained by the attacking player. Any tile that is only controlled by workers is immediately lost in an attack by an enemy. Therefore, players need to be strategic on how they place their units and where their resources are located. Only mechs and faction characters are able to engage in combat. Because of this, Scythe requires players to be able to analyze effectively and have spatial awareness skills. It is important to know where your enemies are located on the board, what their power is, how many combat cards they own, and where they are able to move. Victor Lee and Matthew Berlin mention in their study for board games as a site for distributing computational thinking that tabletop games with resource management help develop skills such as conditional logic and simulation activity. In Scythe, as you choose actions to produce and build, you are having to plan the necessary steps to achieve the desired outcome. That planning process is that simulation activity and can be seen in a highly cognitive demanding games such as chess. Players must be able to gather information effectively and understand what it means in that current game. Every player's resources, power, popularity, the number of stars they have, the number of structures they have and where they are located, the number of workers they have, their mechs and their mech abilities, the player's skills, the player's mat, the number of recruits that they have enlisted, and the number of combat cards are visible on the board. Because it is a turn-based strategy board game, players can use the time between their turns to analyze their opponent's moves, continue to gather the available information, and by knowing where their opponent's positions are in relation to other players, they can make those decisions ahead of time. Untrainer, Kaller, Halsban, and Ram state in a study on a comparison between chess and non-chess players that chess requires problem-solving capacities and working in a problem space, focusing on physiospatial skills. Similarly, Scythe has a space and positioning to take into consideration and going against not just one player, but 4 other players, and even 6 other players in the expansion, where more rules and abilities are added. As mentioned in a study by Matthew Berland and Victor Lee, strategic board games like Scythe develop computational skills in players because players are required to internalize the game rules and devise strategies for optimizing behaviors. By understanding the rules of the game, players can make desirable outcomes by strategically losing a battle. Having calculated the scores, a player could choose to attack a player and lose intentionally to award that defending player their 6th star, resulting in the end of the game and scores to be calculated. However, a miscalculation could end up backfiring and losing them the game, so players must be able to calculate points accurately for the strategy to work. Another example of losing strategically is if a player decides to play only one power point while their attacking player plays 7 and a combat card. Since power points are consumed in battle, the attacker has then given up a combat card and 7 power points, while the defender had only given up 1 power point. Math classrooms can benefit from playing Scythe as it requires its players to constantly be calculating the scores. The non-digital version of the game could even be modified to adjust the scoring system to match the current lessons for a math classroom. Another modification could be in a history class, where factions and their abilities are changed to the countries that were involved in wars that may be covered in a lesson. With the tactical thinking and strategic planning that Scythe requires of its players, it is a fun, competitive board game that can be played at home or in the classroom to develop those critical thinking, computational, decision-making, and visual spatial skills. With numerous combinations of factions and player mats, the strategy can become new every game, allowing players to be more creative and think outside the normal strategy. So why not try hopping into a game and strategizing your next victory?